Hey everybody, welcome back to Blue Grit Radio. This is your host Eric, and today I'm joined by a guest. It's Elena, and she's joining us from Stress and Mindset Coaching with Elena Incorporated. So Elena, thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me here, Eric. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, I appreciate you reaching out, and I don't even remember how far back it was you reached out and we started messaging about, our united and I guess in parallel passions and missions, related to wellness and, mental health and all this good stuff. So do you recall how far back it was? Because there's a lot of messaging and then chatting and then trying to schedule something.
I'd say probably about 4 or 5 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the long game.
Hey, it's the nature of the beast.
Yeah, and you have a crazy schedule too. So without going too far into the chat, I want you to be able to introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and tell us what you do.
Hey guys, so I'm Elena O'Connell and I am a nurse, and I have been a nurse for 14 years and counting. I am still practicing at this time actually, and I do have my own business, which is Stress and Mindset Coaching for first responders and health professionals, where I work with my clients one-on-one. And I also do speaking engagements. And alongside that, I have another 2 businesses that I run, and I do have a 5-year-old daughter. So I am super, super busy, but I love it.
You're a super mom. You wear a lot of hats, so I definitely feel you and appreciate you, especially with the fact that we have a 4.5-year-old, so it's um, very much the same phase of life and the same similar challenges, I'm sure.
Oh, yes. But it's the best, right?
Yeah,
It's the best.
absolutely. So you're in Canada for the listeners that aren't picking up on the slight little nuance. But yeah, it's been great to connect and talk about what you're doing. So what got you into nursing? Is that something you always knew you wanted to do?
So nursing was something I fell into actually. I wasn't sure about what I wanted to do after school, and I thought it would be something that I should try because I'd be helping people. To be quite honest, I didn't know much about it because I've been hospitalized once when I was a very young kid, so I didn't
Mm.
even really remember. And so I just said, okay, why not? Let's try it. And so I went to college and got my diploma and graduated at 19 years old.
My
So
goodness,
it's been a wild ride.
you're a
I've
whiz
done a
kid.
lot of I went through a lot of different experiences, so I've got a very vast background behind me.
Very cool. Was school
Yeah.
something that always came easy to you? Because I know nursing programs can be really intensive, and you graduated at such a young age.
So school was never something I excelled at, but when I got into nursing school, things shifted for me and it became something I was interested in.
Mm.
So I put more work into it, and that made it more rewarding for me. So therefore, it became easier for me.
That's cool, and I'm hopeful, especially with our kids' age and like I guess the generation in between. I feel like there's more opportunities for more opportunities in schools for kids to gravitate towards what it is they're interested in rather than being on the same track as every other kid around them.
Yeah, I think right now is the best time to be quite honest because there's so many different ways that you can make an income. There are so many ways you can impact the world, and we are finding out more and more and more opportunities every single day to broaden our scope, right? Our vision of the world because there are jobs out there that we never even thought we could have.
Yeah, there's jobs that did not exist 5 years ago, much less like 3 years ago, and who knows what's going to exist in 10, 15, 20 years from now. So yeah, it is pretty
Yeah,
nuts when you think about it.
yeah, it's really amazing. It's
Yeah,
really
so
amazing. So I'm excited to see that
yeah, for sure.
unravel.
To cut back to nursing, where did you find your focus and where did you start in, and where has that career taken you in your 14 years?
So I initially actually started in Kingston, a small city in Ontario, and I started with community nursing. Then I went into complex continuing care and retirement home. At that time, I had 3 jobs, so it was a little wild, but it was great because I loved the different experiences,
Hmm.
and I just found myself growing pretty fast in my knowledge base, which was really important for me, especially as a new grad. And then I moved to Ottawa and I got a job at Queens Carleton Hospital, and that's where I spent most of my career so far. I was there for just under 13 years. And while I worked there, I went everywhere. I went to mom and baby, I went to emerge, I worked on medicine for a total of about 2.5 years. Most of my career was on geriatric rehab, actually.
Mm.
Yeah. And my favorite place to float was always emerge. I always loved the hustle, the bustle, the wild, the crazy, the constant go, go, go chaos and quick turnaround. Quick turnaround. It was great.
Yeah. Is
Day.
merge emergency?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the hustle and bustle. So that's definitely something that first responders can relate to. And I think we say first responders so frequently, and we think police, fire, we think EMS, like you know out in the field, but then oftentimes we forget about the behind the scenes or the next stage in the game, which is people that are, in every sense of the way, they're still responsive to all these stressors and the abruptness of things and the trauma of things, right? So on one hand, you have dispatch that's in the mix, but behind the scenes. And then you have corrections, which, is the next stage of the game. And then in the hospitals, right, in the facilities is the next stage of the game where sometimes someone like us in police, we stand by for a little bit. Maybe we stand by for hours and hours, or we just kind of leave, and then the story goes on. And so I'm glad you're here, kind of being able to speak to that. Is that kind of what informs what it is that you're doing, in your business and in your coaching and in your leadership and kind of discussion of seminars?
So I do discuss things that my business focuses on. And my business focuses on 5 pillars: stress management, anxiety, overthinking, mindset, and sleep. The reason why I chose those 5 pillars is because I found they all correlate and flow into each other. If you're stressed, you start to get anxious, and you get anxious, and that creates overthinking. Once you're overthinking, that impacts your sleep. And all of that is impacted by the way you see the world. And the more negatively that you see the world, the more negatively your life is, right? Because we create the world that we want to live in by our thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. What drove you to build this model and put this out?
So it all started for me in the end of 2019. So just before the pandemic hit, I
Mm.
went through my second phase of burnout and it hit me pretty hard. I kind of spiraled out and I was working and it was just so busy and it was, winter time because it was end of December when it hit and I was just burning out from, the hospital bustle, the winter time, everybody's coming in, going, it's the constant crazy, less doctors, less nurses, understaffing. And I just felt myself constantly just not really taking good care of myself, to be quite honest. I would come home and I didn't have good coping mechanisms. So that led me into burnout. And when I hit it hard. And you got to realize in 2019, my daughter was just under 2 years old.
Hmm.
So it was even harder having a little kid at home, right? Because you give so much at work, you give so much at home, and then you just crash and burn and you're done, right? And for me, I still had to show up for her and get through it, right? So I would put on a smile and I would do what I needed to do, but inside I was just shutting down. And I remember going to my doctor's office and saying, "Listen, I need some time off." And he looked at me and he's like, "What's going on?" And I just fell apart. And I said, I can't do it right now. I can't cope. I can't see people. I don't want to hear people. I just need some time. So he said, "Okay, how long do you think you want to take off? And I think I took off about 4 to 6 weeks for the whole time frame. And it was during that time that I started to kind of chisel away at little pieces of my life and where I started to notice, you know what? I'm I'm doing so much, I'm constantly doing, and I'm super stressed out. How am I actually managing that? And then it also got me to look at my sleep because being in nursing, my sleep has been impacted for years. Years.
Mm-hmm.
I used to take really strong sleeping meds for many years. I couldn't fall asleep without them, and I kind of became dependent. And at that point, I just said, you know what, something's got to give and something's got to change. I can't continue doing this. So I started to educate myself about those things, and that's when I kind of realized, hey, I have a hard time falling asleep, and it seems like I can't turn off my brain.
Mm.
So I'm obviously having issues with overthinking. And then I realized I would always stress about going into work the next day and how the day would go. Then I said, okay, well, I guess that is anxiety,
Yeah.
right? Because we don't often realize that that's how it manifests in our lives. And that was the reason that I started looking into those things and educating myself about them. And I started reading, doing all kinds of, courses and empowering myself with all this knowledge because I was so tired of being tired and being in that cycle.
Yeah.
So I started my coaching business in 2021, August 2021. And I've been helping first responders and health professionals with those things because I find until you're ready for that change, you won't make it, right? We need to accept that something is wrong and we need to change it for us to be able to work at ourselves to get ourselves out of that state.
Yeah. I love that. That's there's a lot to unpack there, so I'm going to rewind a little bit.
All
But
right.
yeah, no, thank you for sharing that because that's huge, right? As far as the catalyst for everything, and this is your superhero story, right? This is your origin, where what is the saying? Is it necessity is the mother of invention? Like you were at that low point where luckily, you had a sense to self check, right? Like you burned out. And rather than continue to burn out, which we see our peers and our colleagues doing in first responder work and medical care and all these really high impact traumatic areas, I'm glad you had the sense to take a step back, right? Because I feel you too, especially in those younger years where you're giving so much at work, you're being so responsive for, your patients or, the victims or whoever it is that you're helping. And then you have your colleagues, right? Your teammates that you're helping and your organization you're helping. And then your family, what left you have, which oftentimes sadly, and I'll say for myself, sadly isn't enough and I'm not happy about it. But then like, what do you have for you? And I love the simple adage, right? You gotta put on your own oxygen mask first, or else you're not going to be able to help many people. So thank you for sharing that for sure. And what's I wonder, was there something that when I talk about how you recognize that burnout, you said second one, so maybe that helped. But was there something that allowed you to be introspective enough to see that and recognize you needed to do something to change? Because we do see a lot of our friends and coworkers that we can watch from the outside, and sometimes we can see signs, and sometimes it's harder. But there's clearly not a lot of people that get to that really hard turning point that see it before it's really a bad spot.
So I would say for me, the biggest thing was my daughter, right? I had to shake it off because I still had to show up, right? I don't get a chance to just fall apart and live that way and see what happens, right? I had to figure out a way to get out of it because I needed to. I
Hmm.
needed to bounce back, and that was my motivation to start getting myself out of it. Now, the other thing I'm going to mention is we often don't realize that we're going into burnout, right? But once we hit burnout, if we continue progressing, we will get to a point where we are done with the job,
Hmm.
right? And then that's how people quit because they're actually just in burnout and they've had enough and they haven't taken care of themselves and they just can't do it anymore.
Yeah, and that's so critical. You look at first responders, but the service industry, they say in general, right? And we all know, we've all seen the headlines about, we need more cops, attrition, retention issues. We've seen the same with, nurses, through the last several years, especially through COVID, right? We don't have enough healthcare practitioners due to a lot of those factors. So I really appreciate that, you're able to take that and then figure out what worked for you, really analyze it. I found myself do that in a lot of ways through my career, like trying to fix sleep. And so I'm glad you outlined that for us, and I want to go down each one. Sleep was like one of the biggest things for me. So, but we will save that for last, and also I want to stick to your order. But also overthinking, and those that know me well know that plagues me, and it makes it really hard to turn work off. Especially in my last role, which was hiring and recruiting, where it was essentially like a job that I could work as much as I wanted, right? I could take my work home with me in a way that no normal police officer really can, unless you have casework. But like, I could text and call, potential candidates. I could be responsive. I could work on background checks, like all these things. So it was really a slippery slope, when you get in the grind. And I appreciate too, when you describe burnout as being really hard to pick up on when you're in it, because it just becomes normal, right? And then it's just the next day and the same. And it's like that frog in boiling water that, the degrees go up slowly, but that frog's not going to jump out because, it's acclimated, right?
Yeah. Sadly, that is the truth. That is the truth.
Yeah. So jump into it. Number one was the
All
first one
right.
was stress management. Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So managing stress is so, so important, right? We as first responders, as health professionals, we are super, super busy. And this is what I hear all the time. I don't have time for it. It's
Hmm.
just not possible. My schedule is busy. I can't find time. Here's the real truth. Nobody will ever tell you that there is enough time, right? And there's never going to be enough time if you don't make that time for yourself. It will just not come,
Hmm.
right? Because at the end of the day, we all have 24 hours. We all have things that we need to do. But if we don't prioritize ourselves, we won't be able to continue doing the things that we really want, right? And it starts with taking care of yourself. So managing stress can be done in so many different aspects, different ways, that it can be something you can definitely integrate into your day every day, very simply, right? One of the things that I do is I go to the gym. And I don't know if you've been following me for a while, but I've been going to the gym almost every day for the past month and a half to 2 months. And I found, honestly, it's been a life changer for me. I feel so good after I go, and that's kind of my dopamine kick.
Yeah.
So I know that you exercise all the time too, so you kind of feel that, right? But I can tell you that being in nursing, I never made time for that,
Mm.
right? I never did because I didn't think it was important. I was always saying, I'm too tired. I don't really want to do it. You come up with all the excuses in the world. And we always will if we don't want to do something. But it's learning how to stop those thoughts from coming and doing it anyway,
Yeah.
right? So exercise is huge, right? Stress management starts with your habits altogether. It's how you set yourself up for the day. If you set yourself up by waking up late, running all day, you're already at a heightened state. You're not managing stress from the first minute of your day,
Hmm.
right? Nutrition is super important. That does help actually to lower your stress levels in different ways. So I do talk about nutrition. It's not a big piece, but nutrition is super important. Managing stress is always super easy to do when you're just listening to music. Music is a huge one. Anybody can do it anywhere. It's if you love music, you can connect with it, you will feel your stress levels going down.
Mm.
A lot of people don't agree with this or don't know about this, and I'm sure they don't want to do it. Singing is huge, huge, because it activates your vagus nerve and it actually just takes everything down. So when you're singing and you're actually just enjoying the tunes, it makes a big, big difference. The reason why exercise is so good is because you're moving your body. And by moving your body, you're letting out those emotions that are stuck in your body, right? So that's why dancing or any kind of movement is so, so important. Because again, it's not that hard to go for a 5-minute walk or go for a 5-minute run. Something simple. It
Yeah.
doesn't need to be complicated. And I don't want it to be complicated because at the end of the day, you don't want to overthink about, oh, what do I have to do now? What did I say I was going to do? Right?
Mm-hmm.
It makes it harder for you to be able to implement those practices.
Yeah, I love how you broke those down in a lot of a lot of the examples. You can see how translatable they are, how scalable they are, right? And you're just saying do something. And I love when coaches recognize that, right? There's so many ways to dice this, and how you do it might be different, but and then how I do it and how this person does it. But just the fact is, like, do something, right? And I love how you outline, like, you have to make time for it. Um, you bring up dopamine, and from the medical perspective, being a nurse, can you maybe in a quick version, like, kind of explain to those that are like, well, how does it make sense if I'm so tired that I'm going to expend more energy for even 5 or 10 minutes, and how is that going to benefit me? How am I going to not be even more tired and more burned out?
So I know we all go through that cycle, right? Especially after we work long days, long shifts, nights, which I used to do most of my career. I love nights. I would come home and I would just be done. I'd want to eat and get to bed,
Mm-hmm.
right? The thing is when you arrive home and you're in that state, first of all, you're not managing your stress. That means you're not going to get a good sleep. That means you're on the edge. You're still in the fight or flight or freeze response, right? So you have to end that cycle. So I know it sounds like a lot. 5 to 10 minutes feels like a lot when you're exhausted, but you don't have to do something super exciting. Go for a 5-minute walk outside. Five
Mm-hmm.
minute walk outside is massive, massive. Being outdoors is so important. You can actually, if you notice, you walk outside, close your eyes, feel how you feel. Walk for 5 minutes and feel how you feel again,
Mm-hmm.
because you will notice the whole tension in your body just slowly decreases and you'll feel yourself just, it's almost like a fresh breath. And you'll be like, okay, now I can relax. Now I can get into my house, go to sleep, prioritize what I need to.
Yeah. I love that example, and it makes me think about how, I worked the majority of my career on patrol. So I'd be out of my car, in my car, walk into this building, walk back out. And so you get these moments of fresh air. And, being in the Pacific Northwest, much like a lot of Canada, like, a good portion of the year, it's pretty brisk or, cold, right? So I do,
Yes.
you really do feel that, that fresh air, and that, even the bite of cold can be so exhilarating, and it just makes you feel connected. Um, I really recognized it when I didn't have it, when I worked in an office and a desk much of the time, or if I was going to recruit, like, a lot of times that's indoors, right? And then I had a lot of time where I wasn't by a window, I wasn't actually breathing fresh air out in, outdoors. And I felt it really draining me, right? And so, not to be too woo for some listeners, but it's a real thing, like this connectedness. I love that you talk about music and singing, and if we want to go back to our roots as people, like, from all over the world, like, every culture ever has some groundedness in singing or chanting, or creating that vocal expression as a group in a community. So I think that that's huge, right? And so, just to put a nod to that, we talk about things like the paleo movement and, like, barefoot shoes, and it's like, okay, like, let's talk about singing, right? Because if you want to talk about, like, hashtag paleo and going back to the beginning, like, that's very much a part of it, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how you're bringing that up because I know a lot about it, the whole grounding and not wearing shoes and being in the nature.
Mm-hmm.
That is partially why I did my outdoor yoga in the month of August because I wanted to get outside, that fresh air, feel the ground under my feet. Because when you connect with nature and you actually put your feet on the ground, on the grass, on the sand, you discharge all the negative ions in your body.
Mm-hmm.
And there's no better feeling than that. That's why when you go to the beach and you're at the beach all day, you feel so good. So good, right? And it is such a simple thing you can do, but yet we don't do it enough.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's scientific, right? The negative ions. That's not woo, right? It gets
Yes.
connected with a lot of this kind of hippy dippy thing, but like, no, look it up. Like that's how you discharge it, right? It's called. Think
Yes.
about grounding as far as like electricity and not a person grounding, but like it's the same concept. For
Yeah.
the listeners that are like, what are they talking about? Um, Not to detract too much, but at one of my heights of burnout and trying to figure out the whole health equation was me like trying to go out and like literally ground in like the rain, and my now wife would be like, what are you doing? But where it wasn't working was it's less about that. It was the fact that I was so short on sleep and still trying to lift and
Yeah.
and throwing around weights in the wet grass with my bare feet, and I'm cold and I'm trying to do keto, like all these things. Yeah, you want to talk about burnout and overthinking and creating this bad hodgepodge of things. Yeah, I did that. So whenever
Yeah.
I think about grounding, I kind of smirk to myself. But I don't know if you've heard this. I have heard that for those that think it's kind of odd, like to, take off your shoes and go barefoot. Maybe their setting isn't really conducive to that. I've heard that concrete's better than asphalt as far as conductivity. And I've also heard that, you can put your hands on the grass, right? It's still your body. Like you can stoop down and put your hands on the grass or on a tree trunk and it's still discharging that. Have you heard that?
So it makes sense when you say your hands on the ground. I wouldn't go on the pavement, period. You need the nature contact,
Mm,
right? The pavement is man-made. I wouldn't go there. The whole hugging trees, it is a movement. I know people are going to say, "Oh my God, I can't believe they're talking about it," but it's true because we need to connect with nature. We're not made to be robots, right? When you connect with nature, you're connecting with living things. When you're in an office, you're with dead things. Most people
mm,
don't have plants in their office. They're breathing stale air. You need that to thrive, right? And we've become so attached to our technology, to our sedentary lifestyle, to working a job, coming home, and just vegging out for the rest of the day. We need to come back to the roots, right? We need to come back to nature because nature is where the healing happens.
yeah, I love that. I definitely feel that connect. And for those with pets, like that's one, you're a step closer, right? You're interacting with animals. And, really there, if you have outdoor pets like a dog that goes out and comes in, like you're interacting with those microbiomes, right? Those other organisms. And I'll just quickly say, like I was the over hygienic kid. Like I was raised in that sterile household where there was like no speck of dust, and I got sick a lot, and I got allergies. And compared to my wife, which it's very apples to oranges. But anecdote is, she grew up around dogs. They were running in and out of the house. They're playing in the mud. It was just she'd never get sick. She like 1 in 5 times that I get sick, and my health is dramatically better than I was as a kid. So, um, just a little shout out to being dirty sometimes, and you don't have to sanitize everything. And if the tree hugging sounds intimidating or sounds a little too much, then start maybe with the tree high five or the tree fist bump.
Yeah, no, it's about the simple things, right? But it's funny you say the whole sterile because I am a very much I'm gonna say germaphobe. I
Well, you're
do
in a
like my
hospital though. Like I get,
sanitizer.
yeah, and
Yes.
like being a cop for sure. Like you got to, but when you're not, like when you're not around, bloodborne pathogens and things like that. Sure. Yeah.
I'm still a little too much sanitizer loving queen here, so I will keep it at that. But, that's why I think it's so important to do these things, right? And it's funny you mentioned the microbiome because the more you put yourself out there and the more things you touch and you bring into your body, the more microbiome changes and it actually makes you more immune, like strengthens your immune system and it strengthens you as a human being as well, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because it's adjusting everything in your body. So everything comes from being in the nature,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
And they always say if you have a dog and they lick you in the face, you're getting all kinds of germs in there. I
Yeah,
still don't like the thought of that, but
yeah.
they still sometimes get you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we don't have a licking dog, face licking dog, so that's pretty fortunate. But you think about it, and it doesn't take long for those germs to travel.
Yeah, it really doesn't. It doesn't.
All right,
But
part
it's
two.
good for
Oh,
you.
yeah,
So we'll take it.
yeah, absolutely. Okay, so second section. Is that anxiety?
All
Or did I
right.
skip?
Overthinking, anxiety, it's all hand in hand. So anxiety, we often don't realize what it is, and what it manifests as is just worry. You start thinking about what can happen, right? You start thinking of the worst negative outcome. Let's say you're getting on a plane and you're kind of like the way I used to be. I'd be so anxious and I didn't know I was anxious. I just thought this was normal. I would sit there and I would just, clutch my hands and I would be so anxious about getting on the plane because I was always thinking, oh my God, it's going to come crashing down and I'm going to die and this is it. This is the last day of my life. You kind of spiral out into thinking as much as you don't want to think it, into the negative, into the worst possible case scenario, and it just makes you freeze or it makes you numb
Mm-hmm.
and you're not able to react, right? And when you're anxious, some people live with this 24/7. And I'm really lucky that wasn't the case for me. I only had it mostly at nighttime before going to bed or when I would wake up before going to work. But once I was at work, I'm like, it is what it is. Let's do this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just working through that and knowing that at the end of the day, the worst case scenario that we actually picture in our heads, the likelihood of that happening is so slim that all we are doing is stressing ourselves out and creating that response of, fight, flight, or freeze. And we're creating that, we're staying in it, and it's impacting everything around us. The likelihood of those things happening is 5 to 10%. 5 to 10%.
Mm-hmm.
5%, it will occur exactly as you think. And 10% is it will happen, but it won't even be close to what you imagine.
Yeah, but part of us are, a lot of us are preppers, right? We think the worst case scenario, and like I don't want to be caught off guard, so maybe I don't have to have everything in line, but I want to have a plan. And so you do this, this projecting and this, and I guess yeah, it does blend right into the overthinking. Um, I wonder how much of that, you said like when you're at work, and I think that's because a lot of this type of work, especially if it's faster paced, emergency, or if you're in a busier jurisdiction, in my kind of work, then you don't have time to overthink. You just have, what's in front of you. So in some positive ways, you're pulled into the present. However, I do feel, or I would guess that there are some people that avoid um, the times when they can be anxious by being at work too much, right? So they're not left with their thoughts, and they're not left with maybe these other stressors in their lives, or deficiencies in their life, because when they're in the moment, they don't have time to think about the other stuff, which is not
And
healthy.
you're,
I'll just throw that out.
yeah. Well, I see it all the time that police officers, they get consumed by their job. It becomes their identity, right? It's who you are. But when you're holding on to something so tight, you're not actually able to be present with your family and be yourself,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that is part of the reason why they start working more and they're actually asking to work more. Not that it's, not needed, but they say, "Oh, I'll take the overtime. I'll take the overtime." And part of it is a coping mechanism because they're afraid of the feelings they feel when they go home or when they're leaving the precinct, right? They don't want to feel that emotion, so they'd rather be where they don't feel anything anymore because they've become numb to their job, right?
Yeah. It sounds backwards, right? But yeah, you develop these defense mechanisms and this hard outer layer, right? And it kind of makes you impervious to certain things, for your emotional survival. But then it holds on too long.
Yeah. And that's why I say it's important to work through things. I mean, it's not easy, right? Nothing in life is easy, especially the things that are worth it. And the thing is, you can't stop overthinking for police officers. They need to know what is happening before it happens, right? You have to be prepared for the unexpected. So it's not that we eliminate it, right? It's more about how can you adjust it so it's not impacting you when you get home.
Mm-hmm.
How can we adjust it so your sleep is not impacted? How can you be more present in your personal life so that you are more satisfied with your life?
Yeah. Are there things that you found are good, common, maybe low hanging fruit type of tips for people that lean a bit more anxious?
I would say breath work is super, super important. So, one of the things I do is a very simple breathing technique. It's called Here Now. You close your eyes. Do you want to do it?
I'll do it. Let's do it.
All right, let's do it. So, we're going to close our eyes and we're going to take a deep breath in through the nose. And then before we breathe in, we say here and we breathe
I
out
already
and we
failed.
say now.
I started when you
Huh?
told me. I was doing it when you told me, so I've
Sorry.
already failed. Yeah. Okay.
Sorry.
No.
I thought I
You.
would explain it first because it's
Yep.
better that I
Simon
explain
didn't
it because
say.
then you
That's my
can.
bad.
No, it's all good. It's all good. So we'll close our eyes and we'll go here, deep breath in through the nose, now, and exhale. And here's the most important thing is you have to do long inhales, long exhales. The longer the exhale, the better it is for taking the stress down
Mm-hmm.
and the anxiety down. It's on the exhale that's the most important.
Okay.
All right. So here we go. Close your eyes.
Okay.
Inhale.
Wait. I say here first.
Yes.
Okay. Here.
Here. Now.
Now.
Here.
Here.
Now.
Now. And I'm saying now before the exhale, or did I say
Yes.
do that wrong?
See, we tend to overcomplicate. So
Right.
just go with it.
Okay.
So here,
Here.
breath in. Now.
Now.
Out. Here.
Here.
Now.
Now.
Here.
Here.
Now.
Now. Feel good.
How do you feel?
I feel good. I'm a huge fan of different kinds of breath work. I would not say I'm avid in any of them, but the more I hear about it, the more I think about it. I like incorporating it. I'll throw this out there for people that, again, this might be woo, but if you want to link it to studies and performance, start just looking it up, right? A lot of people have heard of Wim Hof and Andrew Huberman, right? He's done episodes on that. Nasal breathing is the key that most all the big figures are very well explaining, through podcasts or videos and such. So, just a plug for all breath work in general. I will share though that I've been diagnosed with mild sleep apnea since my early 20s. Not so much that, when I did the overnight study, the doc said, well, you don't need a CPAP and it's so minor, but you do have these, you do have this minor one. So when my sleep was more messed up more recently, I was talking to my doc And I brought that up and I was like, hey, do you think I should order up another study? He's like, no, I mean, you're not overweight and all these things. And it seems to be more in line with your stress. It's not something that's been affecting you for all these years. You do recognize that it's when you're more stressed at work and all these things. So he's like, what I would suggest you do is more breath work so that when you do have more significant, sleep apnea, you're not waking up due to your lack of oxygen. You're just more conditioned. And I was like, what a crazy twist. And so for a while, even when I was just walking around or driving around my desk, when I think about it, and the more I do it, the more I think about it, is really just elongating your inhales and exhales and exhaling and holding it and trying to count. And then I realized, just like everything else you practice, you just do a little bit and it gets easier and easier. And even when you're walking, like exhaling and walking and not inhaling is kind of strange and feels weird, but you get way better at it, right? Because you are utilizing oxygen as you move, mildly, but it's crazy what your body can acclimate to. And I think, amongst other things, dealing with stress and anxiety for sure help.
Yeah, I love that actually. And breath work is so woo-woo to people. I don't even know why, because that's the one thing that we do all day unconsciously, right? We're just breathing. And if you ever notice, if you're in a fight or flight situation, you're usually holding your breath,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? And you need the oxygen at that point the most because you
Yeah.
need to respond, right?
Yeah. It's so crazy
So,
that it's like a woo thing because it's like literally the undisputed thing that everyone needs to do to be alive. And literally the
right?
thing that if your air is contaminated or limited in your oxygen supply, like quickly people can recognize the gravity of that. I do
Yeah.
love that at least for my police academy, so many years ago, a lot of talk of, Colonel Grossman and box breathing and how you bring yourself back into parasympathetic through controlled breath work, simple, 4 count thing, right? And so I know a lot of even the more traditional macho types have been very accepting of that and recognizing of that. But, when you bring it up and you don't say combat breathing, you say breath work, a lot of people are like, oh, I don't know about that.
I know. And that's why I say it's funny because it shouldn't be such a weird concept to people, right? But it's if you work on your breathing and you actually breathe properly, which is important, breathing in through the nose and breathing out through the mouth. Now, there's a lot of things I know about breathing. One of the things I'm going to say is when you're breathing through the nose properly, so in through the nose, you're actually decreasing your chances of getting sick because the bacteria gets trapped in your nose, so
Hmm.
your chances of getting sick drops,
Yeah, I've heard that.
right? If you're breathing through your mouth, you're increasing bacteria and you're actually increasing your chances of developing cavities and all kinds of painful issues in your mouth. And you're more likely to get sick,
Yeah,
right?
and aren't you getting a lot less oxygen?
That is true. That is true. So I want to tell you something. I know you're probably not going to like this. So I do have to drop some truth bombs sometimes. So I just learned something. So that's why I thought I would share. So one of the things that you mentioned is that you're thinking about starting a CPAP. What I've
Oh, I
learned
wasn't. But sorry. Keep going.
because because of your breathing right at night,
Hmm.
you're thinking about it anyway. But what happens when you're using a CPAP, your muscles, your breathing muscles are adjusted by the actual flow of
Mm.
pressure in your face. And what happens when you start CPAP, which I found is super interesting and it totally makes sense, your muscles stop working on their own because
Mm.
now they're automated,
Yeah, is it like
right?
atrophying?
Basically. And
Ugh.
so what that means is when you're having this at night, it's actually impacting your breathing during the day. Now you become a lazy breather, which
Mm.
causes more health issues.
No one wants a lazy breather. No, I'm
No.
glad my doc was like, yeah, just try breath work. And truly, like, I think that did help, and I think it helps cardio, and I think it helps stress, and I think it helps all these things. But at the same time, actively working on my work-life balance and stressors at work was huge, right? That helped my sleep tenfold. But yeah, I love that you dropped that, right? And because um, it's not something that I'm pushing away. No, that's great for people to hear because most all of us recognize the most people that are diagnosed to get a CPAP are overweight, right? And I'm
Yes.
glad that they have that. They're getting more oxygen. It's like, but that's not the fix, right? That's a crutch, and that is going to have other ramifications in addition to not addressing the excess. I've heard it called recently non-functional mass, right? That's not helpful to them. So I know I'm glad you brought that up. Um, all right, what's the next prong?
All right. Do you want to do mindset or sleep issues?
Let's go into sleep just because we were on it. I said we are
Yes.
gonna save it for last, but no, let's go sleep because that's what people always love to hear about, and we'll end it with mindset. I think that's a great thing to end with. But yeah, it's talking about sleep
Perfect.
apnea and such.
Right?
Sleep.
Sleep. So the average person is not getting enough sleep, and that's the way things are, right? We all need a different amount of sleep. So when I say you need to have 9 hours of sleep every night, you could say, I'm pretty good on 7. And that is because we all have a different sleep need.
Hmm.
So the average person needs 7 to 9 hours of sleep every night. Interesting fact, women need more sleep than men. Because I think our brain is working in overtime all the time because we're thinking about everything else we got to do all the time, right?
Everything. Isn't that ironic? Because
Everything.
I would not think that women get more sleep than men. They'd probably get the
Yes.
same or less, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
But our bodies do need it. And it's super important, not only for us to function, but our hormones are affected by getting less sleep as well,
Hmm.
right? When you're getting less sleep, your hormones are affected, your immunity goes down. You actually, you're not going to like this one. You start to have more cravings. So when you don't have enough
I know
sleep,
it. Yep.
your cravings go up for sweets and salty things and all the junk,
Hmm.
all the junk. And you don't realize why you're craving it, but that is the reason. Because now your body's trying to compensate, right?
Hmm.
So that is why sleep is so essential. And the less sleep you have, it actually shortens your lifespan as well,
Yeah, I believe it.
right?
Yeah, I mean it's one of those. I think a lot of the working, the hard chargers, especially young men and women, the career climbers are, you hear the adage like I'll sleep when I'm dead. And I'd said it before, right? And I for years like it's energy drinks and it's coffee, and I was I was drinking coffee all night, all through my graveyard shift, and sipping it on the way
Wow.
home and yawning on the way home and like rolling down the windows to stay awake. That's how bad I was. So I share that as like the cautionary tale that that's like way too far. But yeah, my stress hormones were through the roof to the point where I was so exhausted. I'm literally talking about how I'm nodding, like yawning on the way home, rolling down my windows to get, you know, 40-degree air on my face to stay awake and alert enough to drive home. And then I pull
Yeah.
into my house, brush my teeth, throw some water in my face, and I like literally crash out. Like I basically pass out. And then I'm only awake asleep for like 4.5 hours and alert, like the whole wired but tired. And so that's the extreme stress hormones that, my body was screaming for things to change. And so maybe you could kind of analyze what was going on there, from your perspective.
So when you're having caffeine, right, you want that boost. And I get that because like I said, I used to work nights a lot. I worked nights for years. I did mostly nights and very few days because I
Hmm.
just found it was better for me instead of flipping back and forth all the time, right? Now, we all have different ways of managing things, and I can't attest to being on the road when you're working nights, right? So that's a little different for me, but I would be in a hospital setting working nights. So some of the people I worked with had naps. I just had my own way of doing things. At 4 o'clock, it was my tea time. It was always 4 o'clock every time on the dot. My tea time, I'd have my tea and I would have something with lower caffeine, but it just kind of helped push me through the rest of the day
Hmm.
and it would get me home safe. because that was the biggest thing is I wanted to make sure I got home safe and I was able to sleep when I got home. Now, with working nights, I know exactly what you mean when you're driving and you're falling asleep. I've been there, I've done that. It is terrifying. And oftentimes, when you're coming home after nights, you get home and you think, I don't know how I got here. I know I got here. I
Hmm.
don't remember the drive because you kind of black out. You black out, you're on autopilot. So that's why it's super important on what you eat, right? What you eat is important for your sleep. There are things that'll make you sleepy, there are things that won't. And it's important to nourish your body, right? You will feel more tired if you're dehydrated as well. So, drinking water is a priority. Now, I know we need to have that energy go up, especially when we're working nights. And there are different ways to do it. And I know energy drinks are great. I do drink energy drinks now, but they're more natural, which is great for me. But we have to learn how to get through it. And the worst part of it is that we're fighting Mother Nature. That's what we're doing.
Hmm.
We're not made to be awake at night. Our melatonin levels go up so that we can sleep, right? And that's just how it goes. The best thing you can do is make sure that your sleep is a priority and make sure that you create a schedule for yourself. So when you're working nights, before you start your nights, what time you go to bed and what you do. It has to be routine. It has to be. Because if you don't continue in a routine and you don't do the same things every time, your brain doesn't know that you're going to sleep, right? And your brain will get those signals saying, hey, I had a shower. I went and checked everything was closed. I read a book. I've dimmed the lights. I've turned the lights off. It's bedtime. Your brain wires that as a pattern.
Hmm.
So it's easier for you to fall asleep. Now you have to create the same thing for your after nights, right? You have to create a routine.
Hmm.
And after nights, I found myself, I would sleep, but I wouldn't sleep well. So I found it was important for me to eat before I slept because sleeping on an empty stomach, it just doesn't work. It doesn't work. And you need to eat something that's, to me, I found high protein. So things like cheese, milk, yogurt. I had to have something that was good because, again, you're sleeping, you're using the energy. But if you don't eat something before you sleep, you won't sleep well.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying a huge breakfast because when you're full like that, you don't feel good and you won't sleep well
Yeah.
either.
I think that's a great note too, because I did all that research, right? Tell me what to do, tell me what to eat, when to eat it to get the best sleep. So I dabbled a lot, and you're going to hear some or find some hardcore, I mean, everything health. There's polar opposites, right? Some people are like, no, just don't eat for 2 hours. And well, that's going to be dependent on your body type, your how much you ate that day, your energy level, your metabolism. So I have found that when I tried the 3 hours like cut off prior to sleep, um, I would generally wake up hungry. Like I actually would wake up in the early morning hours. When on a true day shift schedule, I would just wake up and my stomach would actually kind of growl, and I'm like, well, that's not just me. Like I'd rather be sleeping. So yeah, a lighter meal. I love that. Protein generally, slower digesting. Um, I've heard the kind of opposite where it's have something that's high glycemic, like some honey. You've heard that. Have some honey because it can spike your blood sugar right when you're going to bed and then drop it. And I mean, to each their own. I think if it works for you, cool. But then I also don't love the idea of having honey and not brushing your teeth if that's in the middle of the night. So, but yeah, I just want to throw that out there, and people have to experiment sometimes, but for sure the heavy meal is not. It's going to be a lot of work for your body to digest that.
Yeah. It's funny you say the honey. I've never heard of that.
Hmm.
And to me, I feel like if you're trying to fall asleep, the last thing you want is your blood sugar sky high
Right.
because you're going to wake up more,
Yeah. And I think
right?
that what I'd heard was that it spikes it, so then it drops. It drops as you're falling asleep and takes you down.
Yeah.
So I mean, I could see if it did work, I could see it easily not working for a ton of people. But then it makes me
Right.
think about sleep hygiene. Some people talk about body temp, and so they say, hey, you want to sleep in a cooler environment, so take a cooler shower. But then other people are like, well, not too cold because that spikes your stress hormones. And then other people are like, no, take a warm shower so your body will cool after you get out of the shower. So I'm like, okay, sounds like, you got to experiment something that's right for you and maybe stick to the middle ground and kind of feel that out.
So what I would say is if you want to wake up, do a cold shower, right? Because that is increasing your response
Hmm.
because your body is saying, "Oh my God, you're shocking me. You're giving me cold water." Right? What are you doing? But when you're having a warm shower, it's relaxing your muscles and it's relaxing your body. And it allows you, when you come out, your temperature drops. Your temperature in the room should be cooler as well overnight or when you're sleeping, because it's important for the body core temperature to drop in order to be able to get a deeper sleep, right? So I would always say warm shower, not hot, warm.
Yep.
You don't want it hot because it's just too much that it has to drop before you can fall asleep properly,
That makes sense. Yeah. Again, avoid the
right?
extremes. But I'll say, especially from that
Yeah,
story of me working out barefoot in the rain, underslept, underrested. Yeah, I was doing the extremes. So some of us gravitate towards that because we hear the anecdotes, we hear the testimonials. We're like, oh, it worked for you. Maybe it'll work for me. But no, I love your approach. It feels so balanced, right? And it's really rooted in a lot of basic things. Um, yeah, I know we could go on sleep a lot. There's a lot to dive in, but let's go to mindset and bring it home. So, talk to me about mindset.
perfect. So I know personally myself, I've always looked at things, let's lower the bar and hope for the better,
Mm,
right? And I went through life saying, I'm a realist. I'm not a pessimist, I'm a realist. And it's something that I would say is just silly now that I know about it because you're just looking for the negative. You
mm,
really are, right? And you hope for the better, which in reality, if you go through life like that, it's like carrying a bag of garbage with you all the time and you're thinking, "Oh, there's some goodness in there," and it's just garbage, right? So it is important to start looking at the positive things because when you're in a state of gratitude, you cannot be in any other state. And this is super powerful because when you're in gratitude, it can pull you out of anxiety, it can pull you out of your overthinking, and it makes you actually appreciate everything that you have because I notice, we live such busy lives. We have so many things, but at the end of the day, we don't even realize that what we have now is what we wanted 5 years ago,
hmm.
right? It was what we really wanted and we worked so hard for. And now it's just, okay, well, that's my new norm. That's okay. I don't care,
Yeah.
you know? And just shifting things in the way you see them is super important. Now, again, this doesn't always correlate to policing because your way of thinking has to be the way you think. It truly does, right? You have to be on alert. But what you can work on is how you are when you're with your family,
Hmm.
right? You need to learn that at home is your home time and you can relax. You can let your guard down and you can be present because at the end of the day, you need to have that break and you need to have a fulfilled life in order to be able to continue doing what you do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And it's super, super important. That's why I say I can't tell you you're going to take out the negative thinking out of your life. It's not possible, right? You have to. You have to because it is your career. But even if you're having a shitty day, sorry for the swearing,
It's
you can
okay.
look and say, you know what? It's sunny outside. At least I'm spending time outside. Start to notice the little things because after a while you will notice the more little things you see, the better your life starts to get,
Hmm.
right? It's just like somebody who is, oh, I don't want to go for a run. Well, if you really think about it, you get to go for a run
Hmm.
because you're able to.
Yeah.
And it is so underprivileged and underappreciated by us. It's the simple things, right?
It really is.
And
Yeah.
when you start to think about it, it's like, wow, I have so many things to be grateful for,
Hmm. Yeah, we can
right?
hyperfixate, and how you started it really resonates with me because I'd say for most of my life I would label myself as a realist, right? And it is the thing I think just about everyone that says that it's almost always verbatim. The rest of the sentence is I'm not cynical. I'm just a realist, right? I'm just practical. Like I'm just I'm trying to be
Yeah,
pragmatic here, and but it is rooted in negativity, right? But I
yeah,
do love how you talk about home and what you can control. I do think that we could expound that and challenge ourselves, especially in law enforcement, right? And that's what I talk about a lot. And most of my career, I definitely was more in the realist, cynicist kind of vein, right? Um, no one's blind to the scrutiny and the challenges of law enforcement. That's a lot of why I discuss and post and record on a lot of these things now more than nothing prompted me to do it 5-10 years ago. But certainly we know that the negativity is there, right? So we don't need to belabor it and keep talking about it. So that's more my thing. And when I try to do something positive or say something positive, and I'm met with all this literal headline regurgitation, I'm like, yeah, I know. Okay, like we all know. Like, do you want to keep talking about that and contribute to the toxic echo chamber, or do we want to talk about something else and focus on the positive, right? I do think it's mindful, I'm glad you recognize that, right? When people are out on the street, they need to be aware of the dangers. They need to be vigilant, but it doesn't preclude them from allowing themselves to experience like a genuine interaction with someone once it's safe, right? Like, not everyone you interact with is a bad person. Not everyone you interact with is trying to hurt you. It doesn't mean don't be aware, and doesn't mean don't prepare yourself mentally, physically, otherwise. But it is to say that, hey, when you do have those interactions, allow yourself to be human. And then when you're back at the station, when the physical danger's not around, allow yourself to contribute towards psychological safety, right? Contribute towards this environment of supporting each other. Allow yourself to be supported, share, commune. I think those things are so huge. And that's what I see, especially in like my teams. And through the years, there's some teams that are a lot stronger and a lot more resilient, is those people that they do share in that, right? They share in the struggle, they share in the laughter and the fun. They make it fun and embracing the suck together, if you will. So, yeah, I love that you talk about all that because when people are really low, it's really hard for them to see it. But you're right; like we get the choice on so many things, and when we fast forward, not to bring ourselves into anxiety, but when we are in our elderly years, and you've done geriatric care, so you saw that a lot, right? But
yeah,
what do those patients wish they had? And I mean, they would love to trade places with their younger selves and their able-bodied selves, even if it is with a sore back and and a tight hip and a crackly ankle. But there's going to be a time when you're going to wish you had that sore back because now you're just in a chair, you don't really feel your back. And yeah, we need
yeah,
to be grateful for those things.
yeah. And part of that, I want to say, it's making small little shifts, right? Mindset is something that everyone has to work at, and it has to be a lifelong thing, right? Because we can't just fix it, because we're always bombarded with things. So, one thing that I'm going to say is when you're starting to say, I don't want to do it, I have to do this, I have to work out, I have to go pick up my kid, I have to do the laundry, I have to whatever. Whatever you have to do, flip it to I get to,
Hmm.
because that is empowering yourself. That is empowering your actions. That is making you feel like you can do something different, right? Instead of being in that constant grind.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we get to pick up our kids. We have kids,
Hmm.
right? And sometimes we lose sight of that. We lose sight of that simplicity and that joy. And we get stuck in that vortex of negativity, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's such a beautiful thing just to let yourself slow down and enjoy those simple little moments, right? One of my favorite things is just going for a walk. It's called the Mare Blue Bog. I don't even want to share it because now more people will go there.
Yeah, best
But
kept secret. Yeah.
it's my little happy place. And I will take my daughter there. And it's a boardwalk over water. And I love it. I just go there and I just be. All
Mm-hmm.
you need to do is just be. Be present. Enjoy the sound of the birds. Enjoy hearing the wind. Feel the wind in your hair. Just let your guard down and enjoy the simple, simple pleasures, right? Because we forget about those things. We get so sucked into our crazy busy lives. And just having that time to be mindful, to be present, to connect with nature, to make memories, to take pictures, to have some fun, to make jokes and laugh, that's so underrated.
I
And
love
it's
that.
moments like that you remember forever, right? You really do.
Yeah.
You really do.
Thank you for sharing that. Don't worry, I'm not going to be crowding your space. I'm a little far for that. However, yeah, listeners, you get to walk around in the wet grass and hug a tree. You got arms,
You
you got
do?
feet, and if you don't,
Yeah.
not to be exclusive, you get to be in nature, right? And however that looks
Yeah.
for you, and take a moment. Be mindful. I mean, that's what a lot of what this all connects back to. This whole conversation is, be aware of your space and your environment. And if I were to offer something about mindset, because I've been in those ruts, and I know a lot of people that have been in those ruts. Really, okay, cool, easy for you to say, Mr. Wellness Guy or Mr. Whatever, um, or Ms. Nurse Gal that's doing all this coaching. But no, it's we've been there, and that's where we're sharing a lot of our experience. And I will offer this is that everyone can recognize the contagious nature of a toxic attitude, right? Like that person that walks into the room and sucks all the life out of it. So
Yeah.
pay attention to the positive aspects, right? If you're willing to receive it and start controlling and toggling your inputs and influences as you can, right? I think iron sharpens iron, and we bring up the people around us. We're the average of the top 5 people we spend time with, and that may be your family, that may be your friends or coworkers, and you can try to get away from that person and try to be around this person more. And then also, what are we consuming? Through the media, social media. Um, I know a lot of people do an unplug, or they follow news and they unfollow it because they're like, well, this source is actually really stressful all the time. So pay attention to that, right? Sometimes it is the little things, and I love that. I feel like that's a theme you've brought up many times, Elena, is that it starts small, right? Little steps, and you'll make a lot of progress over time.
And I love, love, love how you brought up the news. I was going to bring it up too, because a lot of people get stuck in that, right? They need to know. They need to know what's happening there all the time. And all you're doing is putting yourself into a stress bubble.
Hmm.
That's what you're doing.
Yeah.
And the worst thing you can do is to get up and go and watch the news. Go and read the newspaper. Listen to the news on the radio. It is the worst, worst possible habit because now you've programmed your day for negativity,
Hmm.
and that is how you're starting your day. You're already starting at a negative, right? And you're going in expecting the worst. You're already, okay, now there's traffic. Okay, now there's an ambush. Okay, now there's a shooting. You're
Hmm.
going in already on guard, frustrated, and stressed out.
Yeah.
Is it worth it? Is it worth it?
Yeah. I don't follow the news. I get enough of it, right? And so I find out what's happening through memes, which is kind of, it's half embarrassing, but I know something's going on with X, Y, or Z because I saw a meme about it. So far, it's working for me. So I will
Yeah.
say that certain aspects, like my best morning routines, involve, you know, making some coffee. Right? I'm smelling it. I'm waiting for it to brew or to, we do a pour over. So those that are eye rolling, no, it's just it's just easy. Um, but then, I usually foam roll or I stretch or I do some, do some push-ups or something. And it's not like a grinder. It's like just feeling my body, releasing tightness. It's like literally what I have. I got to sit there and do something. I'm going to drink, a big glass of water and wait for the water to boil and wait to, pour over. So I may as well start, kind of rolling around. So that's like what works for me. And I think it hits on a lot of the points that you talked about. Do you mind sharing a little bit of your morning routine or how you start your day that's not involving the news?
Definitely no news here. I kind of live in my own bubble, and I know it's kind of funny for people, but I don't watch the news almost ever. I don't listen to the radio when I'm driving. I have a playlist or a podcast or something that I'm reading. I'm never really in the news bubble ever. And I choose that because I don't want to be stuck in that negativity, right? Because you're programming yourself. So I get my news fix from LinkedIn. Sometimes when people post, that's kind of how I find out, or from coworkers or whoever, because people need to be in the know. So, definitely not something I do. For me, my morning routine is meditation. I am very strict. I've been meditating every day for the past 2.5 years. A lot of you guys will say, oh my God, that sounds ridiculous. I can't do it. Right?
I'm impressed.
Meditation is amazing. It really, really is. And people think that meditation is so complicated and so hard. You have to start somewhere. That's
Hmm.
all I can tell you. It's never going to be easy until you make it a habit, right? And meditation is not there for you to stop all your thoughts because that's what a lot of people think
I'm glad you
meditation is
said that
for.
because that was a lot of my barriers until I started listening to different guided meditations, and I found some that are
Yes.
for the listeners. Like I found some that are pretty short and
Yeah.
did not ask a lot of me. I've definitely listened to some that I felt like asked a lot of me, where I was like, I can't go there, or I can't be that absent. And yeah, it's just I'll let you continue, but it's just creating that space, and I think that there's a lot of value to that.
Yeah, so I know exactly what you mean. It can be hard, right? And it's going to be. That's the reality. I don't want to sugarcoat it. When you start, it's hard and you're not going to want to do it, right? You're not because now you're pushing against a wall and you just don't want to continue. Now, again, it's not about stopping your thoughts, it's about being more present with yourself.
Hmm.
And even after so many years of doing it consistently, I can tell you some days I'm meditating and my mind's still going somewhere else. And that's okay, right? But what I'm learning to do every time is to bring it back. And that's what you're doing is you're training your brain to bring it back. And you're also learning that and you can use it later in your day, right? When your mind starts going into, oh, okay, what can be what I need to do? What do I need to pick up? Just bring it back. I'm here. I need to concentrate on what's at hand,
Yeah.
right? That's what it's doing. It's just rewiring your brain and the way you function. And it's setting you up for success because it's just keeping you relaxed so that you start your day at peace, right? And it doesn't have to be long. 20-minute meditations are going to be brutal for most people. I do them. Again, I've done them for years. So I'm okay with that. Start with 5 minutes.
Hmm.
5 minutes is all it takes,
Yeah, I
right?
love that. And I love how you described you were talking about exactly what I've done, and I'm not an avid meditator, and it's something I'd like to work on, right? But I remember starting, and getting upset and getting, disappointed, right, when my mind wandered, right? So I love a description where it's more like, hey, just be in the moment and be aware without judgment, right? Your thought went over there. Okay, cool. Bring it back without judgment. You didn't do anything wrong. You're just like, come back here. And I think that's just a great way to think about all these aspects of health and wellness that we may be working on. Hey, I missed my workout, or I ate this garbage meal and I meal prepped. I forgot it at home. Whatever. All right, no judgment. Like, let's move forward. Like, you're on track. Keep doing the thing. Don't give up, and let's keep going and be grateful, right, that we're having these conversations, because these are kind of first world problems. So it's fantastic that we can even be having these conversations from across the border for the betterment of our communities. So I really appreciate your time, and I'm super grateful for it.
Well, thank you. Thank you. And what I want to say is, we go in expecting ourselves to be able to do things. And we need to take a step back and realize that when you're trying to implement a new habit, you're not going to be successful. Nobody goes and start playing basketball and becomes a pro overnight. And that's kind of the unrealistic expectations we put on ourselves, right? And that's why I have to bring it there, because you can't expect yourself to be perfect. You just
Yeah.
can't. So just give yourself grace, and just know that even though it's hard and you can't do it yet, with time it will be easier and you will be able to. But it's just a habit. You got to try and continue going and doing it every day.
Yeah. Hang in
So
there.
you got to. You really, really do. And the other things that I do in the morning, I do affirmations. Affirmations are important for me because I set myself up for the day. And that's a great way to program your mind to look for positive things in your life, right? One of my favorite ones is universe, show me how great it can get, right? Simple. And yet it can be super powerful, right? The simpler you make things, the easier it is to do them. And my favorite thing is matcha. And some of you
Mm,
guys might know matcha is what I do now. I don't drink coffee unless I'm traveling. And I have my matcha every morning, but I am intermittent fasting Tuesday to Thursday. And that is something I'm choosing to do. And I like it. It's
nice.
a challenge,
Mm-hmm.
but I like it. So for me, those days, matcha stays out of my sight until 12 or 1 o'clock,
Oh,
which is
so
a little hard because I
so
watch
you
it.
want the tea. Okay.
Yeah, no, I always watch the clock. I'm like, oh, it's getting close to 12. It's almost time to eat. I get super excited, and that's just how I do it. But
Mm-hmm.
on regular days, I will have my matcha in the morning, and that's my little moment of mindfulness,
Mm,
right? Is just to sit there and enjoy it. Do
yeah,
you ever just stop and enjoy the coffee you're having? It's
sometimes.
the best
Yeah,
feeling,
vacation though, and I think that you kind of put a nod
right?
to that. Yeah, you like really just are there, and usually it's outside, or looking out a window at something awesome. Right? Uh,
Yeah,
yeah. So do you do matcha plain? Do you put anything in it?
I have a lot of goodness in there. So, sorry. I have my matcha. I have collagen powder. I have coconut milk, and
I
then I
was gonna
put
say,
MCT oil.
yeah, I love that. I was gonna suggest if you hadn't, the MCT powder, if you whisk that up with some matcha, it's legit. So yeah, the collagen
Yeah,
for sure.
yes.
Great.
Yeah, love it. It's my little moment of happiness. I truly look forward to it, and it's just, it is what you make it. It really, really is. And that's why I say enjoy the simple little things, because we get so bogged down by our crazy lives, and we run out and we're chugging our coffee on the way to work, and we get to work and we're hyped up and we're like, okay, what are we doing next? What's going on? Let's go. Right? That's why you got to bring it back to the basics.
Hmm.
Just bring it back.
It's so
That's all.
true. Um, I love this conversation. I really appreciate your time. And for the listeners, I don't think it's funny, but I'm going to take this moment and say I'm extremely grateful for my family and my 4.5-year-old that has just gotten home. It sounds like she's given my wife a really hard time after asking, "Where's daddy?" And now I hear her stomping and screaming. So um, I'm very grateful. And in a minute, I'm going to be carrying that gratitude into that interaction. Um, but Elena, I want to thank you so much, and please share with the listeners, and this will be in the show notes. But where can they find you and get in contact with you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn. You can find me on Facebook or Instagram, Elena O'Connell. And you can also find me on stressmindsetcoach.ca. And I I just want to share the final thought with you guys. It's about taking time for yourself at the end of the day. It's about taking care of yourself. And at the end of the day, I find that everything I work on is really about self care because it's how you take care of yourself that will lead you to a better place, lead you to the life that you want, and will give you the satisfaction that you truly want out of life.
Love that. Thanks so much, Elena, and thank you to the listeners. As always, share this out, like it, give it a good rating, and clearly, there's so many good nuggets for everyone in your life, not just first responders. I'm thinking of a lot of working parents, a lot of working moms that could very much use a lot of the lessons that you've shared with us. So I'll be sure to send that directly to them once this is uploaded. So again, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Eric. I'm so glad to be here and to have met you. And I can't wait to meet you probably at one of the conferences next year.
Yeah,
So,
we got to do it. We'll make it happen.
yes, we sure will. We sure will.